Imagine your own father dragging you to court because you bought a house before your sister. Sounds unreal, right? That's exactly what happened to me. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Lena Red. I'm 28, and I finally saved enough to buy my own house in my hometown. It wasn't a mansion or anything fancy, just a small place I could call mine. I had worked hard for years, and I was proud of what I accomplished. But my dad, Roger Red, a man who always seemed fair and supportive, suddenly became my worst enemy. He stormed into my life with accusations I never expected. He claimed that I had broken some family rule by buying a house before my younger sister, Mara. I couldn't believe it. The man who raised me was now suing me over something I worked for myself. I felt hurt, shocked, and betrayed all at once. How could the person who was supposed to protect me try to control my life like this? I tried talking to him, explaining my side, but he refused to listen. Every word he said was meant to make me feel guilty, like I had done something wrong by being independent. I realized I couldn't let him manipulate me. I had to stand my ground, not just for me but for my sister too. It was time to fight back and show that no one, not even your own father, could take away what you earned. Growing up, my sister Mara and I lived in a house where everything was carefully planned by my dad, Roger. He had a way of making us feel like life followed his rules, and he always made it clear that Mara would get first in line for big opportunities. Birthdays, vacations, even college decisions, he treated her like she was the favorite, while I learned to wait my turn. Despite all that, Mara and I were close. We shared secrets and dreams, but I often felt the weight of my dad's expectations pressing down on me. I wanted to follow my own path, but I knew stepping out of line might upset him. All of that changed the day I finally bought my own house. I had worked for years, saving every penny, and when I found a place that felt perfect, I couldn't resist. It was my dream coming true. The moment my dad found out, his reaction shocked me. Anger flashed in his eyes, and suddenly, the father I trusted felt like a stranger. He acted as if I had betrayed the family, as if my success somehow belonged to Mara first. I couldn't understand why pursuing my own life caused so much pain for him. I felt torn. On one hand, I wanted to honor the family I grew up in, but on the other, I finally had a chance to stand on my own. My heart ached, knowing that independence came at the cost of upsetting someone I loved. It was a difficult choice between loyalty and freedom, and in that moment, I realized growing up meant making decisions that not everyone would approve of, even the people who raised you. A few weeks after I moved into my new house, I received a notice that left me speechless. My dad, Roger, had filed a lawsuit against me. He claimed I had broken some unwritten family tradition by purchasing a home before Mara. I stared at the papers in disbelief, wondering how something so personal could end up in court. I felt a mix of shock and confusion. How could the man who was supposed to support me go to such lengths? I had always thought his guidance was meant to protect us, but now it felt like a tool to control every step I took. The house, my hard work, and my independence suddenly seemed like a crime in his eyes. Sitting at my kitchen table, I replayed every conversation, every expectation he had placed on me, and it all became painfully clear. This wasn't just about a house. It was about power, control, and proving that he could dictate my life. My father's need to dominate had run deeper than I ever realized. At that moment, I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't allow fear or guilt to control me. I wouldn't let him manipulate my choices or my happiness. I knew standing up to him would be difficult, but I also knew I had to protect what I had earned. For the first time, I felt a sense of resolve. I would face this lawsuit with determination, not just for the house, but for my own independence. This was the beginning of a fight to reclaim my life and show that no one, not even my father, could decide my path for me. I never imagined that following my dreams would make me the villain in my own family. Every time I thought about my dad, Roger, I felt torn. I loved him, but a part of me resented how he always tried to control every choice I made. The lawsuit had opened my eyes to a side of him I hadn't fully seen before, and it left me feeling trapped between loyalty and self-respect. Guilt washed over me. I questioned whether I was wrong for stepping forward with my own life. Could I have avoided this conflict if I had waited, like he wanted? But then, another voice inside me reminded me of all the years I had compromised, all the moments I had put my own desires aside to please him. I realized that living under his constant oversight had stolen pieces of who I was. To make sense of everything, I started keeping a detailed record. I wrote down every incident where he had manipulated situations, every unfair expectation he had placed on Mara and me, and every time he had tried to make me feel like I wasn't enough. It became a private journal of truths I had long ignored, a map of how he used his authority to control our family. At first, it felt strange, even uncomfortable, to catalog his behavior. But as the pages filled, I felt a growing sense of clarity and purpose. I understood that this documentation wasn't just for me, it was a way to protect myself and prepare for the battles ahead. For the first time, I realized that I could stand my ground without feeling guilty, and that knowledge gave me a quiet strength I hadn't felt before. Mara had always been kind and trusting, never suspecting that our father, Roger, could manipulate situations to suit his own agenda. She saw him as loving and fair, the kind of dad who always knew what was best. She didn't realize that behind the smiles and guidance, he often played favorites and used guilt to bend us to his will. When the lawsuit came to light, Mara was caught in the middle. She wanted to support me, but she also felt pressure to obey Dad's wishes. I could see the confusion and worry in her eyes. It broke my heart to watch her struggle between loyalty to our father and standing by me. She didn't deserve to be dragged into this conflict, yet she was facing the same weight of expectations I had lived under for years. I knew I had to act carefully. I sat down with her and explained, gently, what had been happening, how Dad had tried to control both of our lives, how this lawsuit wasn't about fairness but about power. I wanted her to understand without feeling like she had to choose sides. At the same time, I had to protect my own independence. I reassured Mara that she could still love our father and maintain her own path, just as I was doing. I made it clear that standing up for myself didn't mean abandoning her, it meant creating boundaries that would protect both of us. In that moment, I realized I could fight this battle without isolating my sister. I could defend my rights while helping Mara see the truth, giving her the chance to make her own choices rather than being trapped by Dad's control. It was delicate, but necessary, for both of us. Realizing I couldn't face my father's lawsuit alone, I decided to hire a lawyer. That's when I met Avery Knox, a sharp and determined family law attorney. Avery had a reputation for seeing through hidden agendas and spotting patterns that most people overlooked. From our first meeting, I felt a sense of relief. I finally had someone on my side who understood the depth of the problem. We began by reviewing everything about my family's history. Avery asked detailed questions about my father's past decisions, his preferences, and the ways he had tried to control both Mara and me. Piece by piece, we started building a picture of his behavior, a pattern of favoritism, manipulation, and subtle threats. Each detail added weight to the case, showing that the lawsuit wasn't about fairness but about his need to dominate. Avery also helped me gather documents, emails, and records of conversations where Dad had tried to impose his will. We looked for proof that his claims about family traditions were inconsistent and self-serving. Every bit of evidence strengthened my position, and for the first time, I felt confident that the truth could stand up in court. As we prepared, the tension grew. I knew the courtroom would be intense, filled with pressure and emotions running high. Avery warned me that facing my father directly could be challenging, but she also assured me that with clear facts and a calm approach, I could hold my ground. By the time the trial approached, I was nervous but ready. Avery had helped me see that I wasn't powerless, and I had a strategy that could finally turn the tables. The confrontation was coming, and I was prepared to fight, not with anger, but with evidence and determination. The morning of the trial, I stepped into the courtroom, and the tension hit me immediately. Family members sat in the pews, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern, while strangers whispered quietly, glancing between my father and me. The room felt heavy, as if every word spoken would echo far beyond these walls. Judges and lawyers moved with precise formality, their expressions serious and unreadable. Papers shuffled, pens tapped, and the murmurs of the spectators added a low hum of anticipation. Every glance from the judge seemed to weigh on me, and I could feel the energy of the room pressing down, making it difficult to breathe. I took a deep breath and reminded myself why I was here. My father, Roger, had always wanted control, but now he was about to witness me standing firmly on my own. I thought about how much it must frustrate him to see me confident, unshaken, and ready to defend my choices. The idea made my stomach tighten, but also gave me a strange sense of satisfaction. I glanced at Mara, sitting quietly a few rows behind me. She looked nervous, unsure of how events would unfold, and I silently promised her I would handle this carefully. This wasn't just about me, it was about proving that we could have independence without being crushed by someone else's authority. As the bailiff called the court to order, I felt my heart race. The moment of truth was approaching, and I knew my father was about to discover that asserting myself didn't make me rebellious, it made me capable. I straightened my posture, ready to face the challenge, knowing that every eye in the room was on us, and the outcome could change everything. When my father, Roger, stood to speak, his voice was steady but carried a sharp edge. He painted a picture of betrayal, insisting that I had violated cherished family traditions. He spoke of fairness, duty, and loyalty, framing my decision to buy a house as selfish and reckless. Each word felt carefully chosen to stir doubt and guilt, designed to make me question my own choices. He appealed to emotions rather than facts, describing the impact on Mara and suggesting that I had deliberately disregarded her needs. His tone was convincing, and I could feel some of the spectators leaning in, caught by his performance. He tried to portray me as careless, someone who had disrupted the family balance for personal gain. But I refused to let fear or anger take hold. I reminded myself to stay calm, to breathe, and to listen carefully. I didn't interrupt, I didn't argue in the moment. I knew that showing intimidation or reacting impulsively could give him the advantage he was seeking. Instead, I focused on the facts, quietly preparing for the moment when I could respond with clarity. As he finished, the room held its breath. The tension was almost tangible, and every eye seemed to flicker between us. I could sense that the judge was observing not just the words but the intent behind them, weighing the weight of each claim. In that moment, I realized the outcome would hinge on more than my father's arguments, it would depend on the evidence, the truth, and the way I presented myself. The judge's response would be the turning point, and I knew that staying composed was my strongest tool. When it was my turn, I stood and handed over a folder that contained years of records. Every page detailed moments where Dad had shown clear favoritism, controlled finances unfairly, and subtly manipulated situations to serve his own agenda. Receipts, letters, and notes lined up to reveal a pattern I had finally organized into something undeniable. As I spoke, I laid out each example carefully. I explained how allowances, gifts, and important decisions had consistently been tilted toward Mara, how I had been expected to wait my turn, and how his expectations had limited my opportunities. I described the emotional pressure he applied, the subtle threats, and the ways he had tried to shape both our lives according to his rules. The courtroom reacted immediately. A low murmur ran through the audience as people began to grasp the depth of the situation. Some faces looked shocked, others curious, as if seeing a side of my father they had never noticed. For the first time, the power dynamic felt shifted, the evidence spoke louder than accusations ever could. I glanced at Mara. Her eyes were wide, and I could see relief and understanding flicker across her face. She finally seemed to recognize the patterns I had tried to explain for years, and in that moment, it felt like we were on the same side, ready to face the next challenge together. But even as I presented everything, a knot of suspense tightened in my chest. Would this documentation be enough to sway the court? Could the truth outweigh the influence and authority my father carried for so long? The answer was still uncertain, but I knew I had laid the strongest foundation possible to reclaim what was rightfully mine. After hours of listening to arguments, evidence, and testimonies, the room fell into an almost unbearable silence. Everyone waited, holding their breath, as the judge reviewed the final documents and prepared to deliver the verdict. The tension was so thick it felt like you could cut it with a knife. I sat upright, hands clasped tightly, heart pounding in my chest. Mara's hand rested lightly on mine, a silent show of support. The air was heavy with expectation, and even Dad looked uncertain, shifting in his seat as if sensing the balance had finally shifted. The judge cleared their throat, and a hush swept over the room. Every eye turned toward the bench, every ear straining to catch the words that would decide the outcome. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, and I felt the weight of years of struggle pressing down in the quiet. Then, the judge spoke, and the words hit like a sudden thunderclap: "Case dismissed." The courtroom seemed to freeze. Dad's face went pale, his jaw tightening in disbelief. I felt a rush of relief wash over me, mixed with a quiet sense of triumph. Finally, the truth had prevailed, and my independence was protected. The tension that had built for so long released in an almost tangible wave. Mara's eyes welled up, and she squeezed my hand, a small smile breaking through the fear that had lingered. Dad remained frozen, clearly stunned and unable to respond. In that moment, I understood the full impact of what had just happened. Not only had I defended my home, but I had reclaimed my life from the control that had haunted me for so long. The moment the judge finished, a tense quiet lingered in the courtroom. Dad sat rigid, fists clenched, eyes fixed straight ahead, seething silently but powerless to challenge the decision. It was clear that he had underestimated the consequences of his actions, and now the reality of his loss weighed heavily on him. Mara, on the other hand, finally seemed to understand. Her expression softened as she looked at me, a mixture of relief and recognition in her eyes. For the first time, she saw beyond Dad's carefully constructed image and realized how much control he had tried to exert over both of our lives. I could see a shift in her, a new awareness that perhaps she didn't have to be caught between loyalty and independence. As I left the courtroom, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was a deep sadness for the fractured relationship with my father, for the trust that had been strained over the years. But there was also a surge of empowerment, a sense that I had finally reclaimed something that was mine by right, my voice, my choices, and my ability to stand firm. Walking home, I reflected on what came next. Could I rebuild some connection with Dad, or was it safer to maintain distance and protect myself from further manipulation? The thought weighed heavily, but I knew that whatever I decided, it would have to honor my boundaries and my own growth. In that moment, I understood that victory didn't mean erasing the past. It meant facing it, learning from it, and choosing how to move forward on my own terms, with clarity and strength. After the courtroom drama ended, a sense of calm settled over me that I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I knew my independence was secure. No longer could Dad dictate my choices or make me feel guilty for pursuing my own life. The house, my savings, my plans, they were finally mine without interference. I turned to Mara, and we began talking about the future. Together, we discussed ways to protect ourselves from being caught in old patterns of control. We made plans for shared support, communication, and healthy boundaries, ways to stay connected as sisters without being pulled into Dad's manipulations again. It was empowering to know that we could design a relationship on our own terms, one built on trust and honesty rather than fear or expectation. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the bittersweet feeling that lingered. Family had always been complicated, and while I had won this battle, it came with the reminder that love and respect aren't guaranteed just because you share blood. I felt satisfaction in standing up for myself, but also a quiet sorrow for the fractured trust that might never fully heal. Still, there was hope. I realized that family wasn't just about obedience or following traditions. It was about understanding, support, and mutual respect. Mara and I could redefine what that meant for us, building a connection that was genuine and free from control. For the first time, I felt fully in charge of my life, confident that I could honor my dreams and my values. That victory, though hard one, was mine to keep, and it gave me a strength and clarity I would carry forward into every decision I made. Now that everything has settled, I keep thinking about the choices I made. Standing up to Dad was one of the hardest decisions of my life. I had to weigh respect for family against my own right to live freely, and it wasn't easy to decide where loyalty ended and self-preservation began. I wonder sometimes if taking this stand was the right path. Could giving him another chance have healed the relationship without compromising my independence? Or would it have only allowed him to continue controlling our lives? These questions linger in my mind, and I know I'm not the only one who has faced moments like this, torn between love and personal freedom. Mara has been an incredible support, helping me see that protecting myself doesn't mean abandoning family. We've started imagining a future where we can have a healthy connection without being trapped in old patterns of control. It's a new chapter, and I'm cautiously optimistic about what's ahead, even though some uncertainties remain. I want to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think I did the right thing by standing my ground, or should I have considered giving Dad another chance? I'd love to know your perspective, because sometimes the hardest decisions are also the most personal, and hearing different experiences can be comforting and eye-opening. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you reflect on your own family, please take a moment to support the channel. Subscribe so you don't miss future stories, hit the notification bell to stay updated, and share this with anyone who might relate. Your voice matters, and I can't wait to see what you think. Do you think I did the right thing by standing up to my dad, or should I have given him another chance? I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like this.